So this is an Ikea GODMORGON bathroom cabinet. Basically do this in two phases. One phase is the drawers, the other phase is the cabinet. Before starting the actual cabinet phase, what you got to do is you got to peel all this blue plastic stuff off. And the cabinet goes together more or less like any other Ikea furniture. The drawers on these are a bugger, and the top drawer is kind of made to be customized in order to work with the countertop, which has the sink and everything right there in the countertop. This particular one is the actual IKEA sink, but these are commonly adapted to work with other company sinks. So what I've done is I've separated this out so that the cabinet's separate from the drawers, and we get right into it. Alright, so the first actually few stages of this basically involve putting the two sides together on the outer cabinet. And what you'll notice that in this particular type of IKEA stuff, every hole gets used. It's not like some of the desks where there's a right side and a left side way of doing it, where there's a bunch of holes that end up not getting used. On this one, every single hole on the inside gets used. One of the things that can get really confusing, which holes to use on the drawer rail mounts. And that can change if you're going to customize this. But the regular factory way of doing it is that we're going with the upper set, and the holes are pre-drilled, so they're going to come up in the same place, and then three back. Okay, so it's the upper and then three back. This little nubbin is what that drawer actually locks into, so that's always going to be toward the rear, toward the wall mounting brackets. It will use the exact same wall mounting brackets that all the other IKEA furniture uses. However, you would normally expect not to use the rail system that's used, let's say, on the upper kitchen cabinets. You would be bolting this to the wall. One of the problems with that is you're unlikely to have a stud exactly where the back of the cabinet ends up. Okay, so I like to put a board across the wall to do that. Other people will use drywall anchors. Personal preference on that sort of a thing. What you'll see here is that we've got the little turn lock anchors on here. They go in a lower position. Dowels go in the upper position. One of the things about this that's also different from a lot of the IKEA furniture, whereas this is really more of a, this is a bathroom cabinet. It's made to be a bathroom cabinet. One of the things that makes this different from the other furniture is that these holes are the same size, so it's easy to confuse one for the other. So you'll just have to look at the diagram, look at the video again, and notice the placement of all of these items. Notice that here we've got the turn lock anchors on the outside with the dowel on the inside. Here we've got the turn lock anchor on the lower with the dowel on the upper, and of course it's a mirror image for the other side. And then on the lower section, where there's going to be a single large piece attached, the turn lock anchors go on the outside, dowels go on the inside. So the other thing we're going to look for is just make sure we've got consistency on where our drawer mounts go. Now, in the original instructions, they say not to do this until later. The reason I like to do it now is because I really don't want to be on my hands and knees putting these things in, crawling on the floor in the back of the cabinet. So we're going to get this stuff put on, and at this stage it's relatively conventional to the IKEA system design. So these pieces all attach to one side. What you want to make sure is that the turn lock fasteners are on the inside of the cabinet. Now, you may be tempted, because this is the back of the cabinet, to have the turn lock fasteners up against the wall where they don't show. It's the inside of the cabinet. I would prefer to have these show in case I need to reach it and get things apart. So at the last stage, of course, we set this down, we put the other one on. Okay, a little side note on the leg attachment. There's no preset holes for these, so you just have to install them on these. And there's several different styles of legs used on these, and a lot of times they're only going to give you legs for the front, not the rear, because the rear gets bolted to the wall. I would say fully assemble the legs before screwing them on. Do not pre-drill these holes. Just hold it really carefully. Let the screws drill themselves in, or else if you use a pre-drilled hole, and the way that the screw is so narrow, it's likely to strip out if this gets moved around. So don't pre-drill the holes. The screws are pretty pointy. Just let them drive themselves in with that impact driver. Don't get overly aggressive with it. I prefer to have a little bit of rear inward bias on the mounting on these. Different people have different opinions on that. Sometimes they set these all the way back. Of course, this is adjustable after you get it on the floor. Otherwise, just back it all the way down. But I would suggest getting these assembled before you attach them. Okay, this part is likely to get frustrating for some people because there's a few wrong ways that it can go together. So hopefully we're going to show what is going to happen. This is the front of the other side. This is the rear of the other side. This hole ends up corresponding to a rear tab on the drawer pull. That's actually how it locks in place. I know it seems weird, but that's how it goes. So take a look at the orientation on this so you can tell what's going on. Basically, this one with all the extra holes is the one which ends up screwing to the base here. And so take a look at the orientation on this as I lay this out, because there's definitely a few wrong ways this can go, and you notice these are going to end up being mirror image of each other. There's no other way that works. And what will happen is this ends up on the inside, and then all the attachment tabs and everything end up on the inside. And so these have to be mirror images of each other, not exactly matching, in order for the rest of this to go together. Okay, kind of a bugger on these drawers. You get these little plastic things that have to be hammered in, and then they're basically kind of like a drywall anchor. And they spread when you put the screw in. The problem is when we're putting this piece on, it's kind of hard to get a power tool in there, and you do need to get a power tool in there. If you don't use a power tool, you're not going to get enough power to draw this in. So it's a little bit of a bugger on that. The other thing is the drawer pulls. There's pre-drilled holes on here. But what you have to do is you have to switch over to a PH1 bit in order to get those. And it should just draw itself in and center itself when you do that. And of course you've got these little nubbins we're going to do. You got this little adjustment thing, which I think is just goofy. But we center it before putting the drawer sides on. Now, the way this thing's made so that you can clear the plumbing stuff, basically, is you may end up cutting some of these slats away. Not so much on a lower drawer. The lower drawer, once it's assembled, is probably just going to stay that way. But on an upper drawer, however, I would say do not modify any of those until you're already, until this thing's in its place and you know what shape the plumbing stuff is going to be. The other thing that's a little bit of a bugger, and I would just say put it together a couple of different ways so you know how these things are going to go for you, because what they're going to do is they're going to hold these slats together in kind of a slide together, snap together setup. Very difficult for me to demonstrate with while I hold the camera. But basically we slide all these together. Now the whole thing, even when you screw it to the face of this, which is what's going to hold the drawer bottom on, it's still pretty loose. So you have to make sure you're going to get these screws in. And those are a PH2. So the only place we're using a PH1 on this is over here. But you definitely need to break out a PH1 or you're just going to strip them out and have problems. So we're going to get these drawers together, and I'm going to show a little bit more of the drawers. We're not going to show this thing completely installed because installation is not going to happen until next week. But this should get you far along enough that if your job is to get one of these things put together, you can. And I would say it's about an hour and a half project for a normally skilled person. A highly skilled person maybe an hour, but you're going to go over an hour on this thing. So yeah, we can get things wrong, but I wanted to leave that previous part of the video in here. This can be frustrating because it can go wrong. But basically, these holes on a short piece need to face one way. This hole right here on a short piece needs to face the other way. Now there's a hole here which has no corresponding hole here. That's because that screw that goes here, has no corresponding screw here. But this hole needs to line up with some stuff on that back. So keep that in mind as you're doing the orientation on these. It can be frustrating because there's a few different wrong ways that it can go. But you'll run into that when you try to put the back and the bottom on. Okay, so with the back on, we can see how these holes line up. These are going to be the holes that the screws go in here. And the bottom slides into this. The bottom can go either way. Notice it's a, you know, top or bottom on that. So when this slides in, it stays, sorry about that, relatively loose, right? It's not very secure in there. And it doesn't become very secure in there until we attach the whole front. So keep that in mind. This doesn't become very secure until we attach the whole front. But it's like that. We just want to make sure that it settles down enough that this stays flat. These things aren't riding up and down a little bit. You may want to put those side screws in now, but generally we don't do it until this is together. And so at this stage we're going to very carefully place this on the front and attach it. Okay, just when I thought I was done, there was still a little bit more to do. Little caps that press onto these. I think that's a new feature on these. And of course the little dividers. Now those eventually get moved around right and left. But it's just a press-on plastic that's made to hold on by the tension of the drawers, because it's ever so slightly wider than the inside of the drawers, so the tension would hold it. What I do is I Gorilla Glue that, because we really don't want that coming apart when somebody goes to adjust those things right or left. And of course we get those for both the upper and lower. I wasn't mistaken when I stated earlier that these are different drawer sides. It's been a little while since I've built one of these things.